All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone talking college football with you every Tuesday and Thursday. We do it 4 days a week when we include the Wednesday and Friday shows of our friends at the 10, Doug Kazarian, Greg Waddell, and Troy Macker. So, Paul, let's get right into it. And I was at the prime time SEC venue this past weekend in Tuscaloosa at Bryant-Denny Stadium for LSU and Alabama. Always brings out a beautiful crowd. Paul Stone got to trump me, boy. He's going to Sanford Stadium between the hedges to go see Texas and Georgia this weekend. That's where we'll start with the Georgia-Texas game at Bet Rivers right now. Georgia is a 6-point favorite, total 48. We're on opposite sides on this one, Paul. So you're laying the points. I'm taking the points in this one, and I think it's more of my initial evaluation of Georgia, and this applies to the entire league. And I saw it in person on Saturday night. There's a lot of good teams in the SEC this year. There's no super teams. I just don't see it. The ceiling is as low as it's been in a while. Now the floor is really really competitive. Minus Mississippi State and Georgia on Saturday in Starkville. But there's been a lot of teams near the bottom of the standings who have been very competitive near the top. Complete opposite in the other financial most financially stable conference in the Big Ten. Their ceiling is high, but their floor is really low. So a lot more parity in the SEC, and maybe that's my angle with the Georgia Bulldogs. With this one, they've been a little bit fortunate. They covered by half a point against the Kentucky Wildcats. The calls against Auburn. I mean, I know we've talked about it a lot, but I can't take that away. They were the Florida game. Now they did not cover in that one, but man, Florida's got them on the ropes. They got the lead and the ball in the red zone in the fourth quarter on a 4th and 1. They get stopped. I will give Stockton credit. He's at his best. We know about the Tennessee comeback as well. A missed field goal. They needed a 4th down conversion, a 2-point conversion, a missed field goal, and a win in overtime to win that. Kirby Smart said it himself. We didn't deserve the win of this football game. So maybe it's just this Georgia team is not what it's been under previous seasons under Kirby Smart. Guys in the pros right now like Davis, Carter, Dean, Ringo, Smith, those guys aren't around anymore, and I don't see that level of defense. So I looked at it, and I don't look at total defense and scoring defense. I look at yards per play, opponent's yards per play. Georgia's just outside the top 30. And that's not quite where they've been over this great run under Kirby Smart. But maybe because the depth and it's football, and we talked about theories. Why is there more competitive balance in college football? The depth, the two deeps are just not what they were in the SEC. Those guys are going for immediate playing time elsewhere. And I mean, you can only you pay your player payroll. You can only play the starter so much. So how much are you going to devote to your backups along the way? I just think it's a two teams that are equally matched. Certainly, the first 3 quarters produce maybe okay. Is Texas turning a corner against Vanderbilt? Then you're scratching your head a little bit about their killer instinct, allowing Vanderbilt to get their hands on the ball in a one-possession game with under a minute to go in Austin. So I'm going to take the points here. It's not my favorite play on it, but no, I know Paul, you like Georgia here as the home favorite.
Yeah, I'm a Longhorn guy, wearing a Longhorn hat this morning, but I do like the Bulldogs. But you almost convinced me to change my mind, but not quite. Not quite.
I'm sure you'll change my mind, no, Paul.
I certainly understand and agree, really, with a lot of your reasoning there. On Saturday night, there between the hedges at Sanford Stadium, Georgia will be going for their 3rd victory over the Longhorns in a span of just under 400 days. So they'll be going for the three-peat there, so to speak. Last year, Georgia wins the regular season battle there in Austin 30-15 as a 5-point underdog. And then in the SEC championship game in Atlanta, defeat the Longhorns 22-19 as a 3-point underdog. Be going for the trifecta again Saturday night in Athens. This time they're going to be wearing that favorites tag, though, as a 6-point home favorite over the Longhorns. And despite being almost a full touchdown favorite, I like Georgia to get the job done and cover the number Saturday against the Longhorns. You look at this Georgia team since losing to Alabama at home 24-21 back on September 27th. They have reeled off 5 straight victories, covering their spread in 4 of those wins. You mentioned their quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. He really has developed nicely, especially as a passer. There was some questions about his, ability to lead the offense as a throwing quarterback, and I think he's really come along nicely. The Dogs very balanced on offense, averaging 199 yards a game on the ground versus FBS opposition, 240 yards through the air. So they have outstanding balance. Texas, meanwhile, they enter with a 7-2 record. They are still very much in the playoff picture. Obviously, this game on Saturday will have a big impact on whether or not they make the playoff. But to me, it just seems like the Longhorns have been playing with fire. They've been living too close to the edge in recent games. You look at their most complete performance of the year back on October 11th against Oklahoma, beat the Sooners there in Dallas 23-6. But since that game, they have been taken to the road in overtime against both Kentucky and Mississippi State. Escape with victories in both those games, could have very well lost to both those teams, but did defeat them in overtime. And then, as you mentioned last week, their last game, almost 2 weeks ago now, they hold on to defeat Vanderbilt 34-31 after leading by 24 points at the start of the fourth quarter. Their defense, that's kind of what they've been known for this year. Their offense is starting to come along a little bit as Arch Manning shows some development and improvement as his first season as a starter continues. But that defense has kind of been their calling card. But in their last two games against Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, they have allowed a total of 69 points, 868 yards in those two games. So the defense not playing all that great their last two games. I just like Georgia's trajectory here. This is a Georgia team that, despite losing at home to Alabama earlier this season, 51-2 straight up in their last 53 home games. Obviously, they could defeat the Longhorns and not cover, but I think they're going to win this game by more than a touchdown. I like Georgia Saturday night -6 over Texas at Sanford Stadium between the hedges. And I think the Dogs, I think they're still a little bit pissed off about Bevo attacking Uga a few
Well,
years ago at the bowl game. So I think there's going to be heck to pay in Athens. Give me the Bulldogs over the Longhorns.
double revenge spot for the Texas Longhorns, who were beaten twice by the Georgia Bulldogs, of course. And I thought that it was a little welcoming party to the SEC by Georgia. They were really keyed up. That was their most impressive game of the year in Austin, where they overcame multiple interceptions by their quarterback Beck in that game and still just handled them. I thought Texas handled Georgia for most of the first half in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. Just didn't create enough of a cushion. Gunnar Stockton came in off the bench and he ran the ball a lot. And well, once Notre Dame had a chance to prepare for his passing deficiencies at that point, they took advantage of it. But 2 times last year, the Georgia Bulldogs beat the Texas Longhorns. Log into your Bet Rivers app each week to opt into a 3-pack of college football profit boost, including a live boost, a same game parlay boost, and a boost to use however you please. See the app or website for more details. Let's continue. Let's go to the the big ketchup bottle. It used to be. Now it's an insurance company place where the old Heinz Field, when downtown Pittsburgh, where I've been for some games. And well, here come the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and they destroyed a Navy. Boy, Navy's straight up record and their ATS record got to be the biggest disparity in all of college football. Notre Dame at Bet Rivers now 11-point favorite, and 54.5 is the total. And well, Pitt quarterback, since they made that change the morning of, Pat Narduzzi took freshman Mason Heinzel and made him the starter. The Pitt Panthers are 5-0 straight up. They are 5-0 against the spread. So off of a bye week, this is by far the toughest game for Notre Dame to run the table after dropping their first two and securing that playoff bid. I just think this is too many points at home. Tough to get into in front of that Notre Dame that runaway train right now because and look, CJ Carr is his numbers don't lie. He is an impressive quarterback, but just 11 points on the road against a team off a bye that's really playing very good football right now. I'm going to have to take the Pitt Panthers in this one. Paul, you and I projected this line last week. Both of us had it just under a touchdown. So the Navy route is going to push it over double digits. Not in my book. I think there's some value here taking the Pitt Panthers at home plus the 11.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Pitt, man, it is difficult not to be impressed with that Pitt offense that averages 37 points a game versus FBS opponents this season. As you mentioned, they have been further energized by the insertion of true freshman Mason Heintzel at quarterback, took over for former starter Eli Holstein at the start of October. As a double-digit home underdog, Pitt does look quite appetizing. My concern, and I might get on Pitt ultimately, it's certainly going to be Pitt or nothing for me. But my concern is they really don't have a signature victory, in my opinion. And they've got a schedule. They've played one of the weakest Power Four schedules to this point in the season. That schedule currently ranked 67th by Jeff Sagarin. But still, man, 11 points just seems too juicy. And I think on the as far as the total, I think we're going to see some points here too. I think there will
Oh,
be some scoring
man.
in this game, and I ultimately might get on Pitt with you, and certainly am going to consider the over as well in this game.
That total does seem a little low. I mean, for this game, I mean, everything points to points in this one. And the other thing that Heinzel does, and look, I mean, the numbers by Eli Holstein weren't terrible. I mean, now he just had a rough game against Louisville and some critical turnovers against Louisville that played a big part in them losing that game. Remember, they led that game 17-0 out the chute. But his overall numbers are pretty good. But Heinzel's just a little bit better athlete, can extend a little bit more, just a little bit better with his legs. And he's got a little something, Paul. I mean, and we saw that in his first road start down at Doak Campbell because that was a tough place to play. Florida State did give them a good effort in that game, but came up a little bit short. But yeah, should be a lot of points today, or I'm sorry, Saturday downtown Pittsburgh with Pitt and Notre Dame. Players who place a qualifying same game parlay of at least $10 on eligible NFL or NCAA football games will receive one standard entry into the weekly squares game. Winning standard squares will be awarded a prize of a $20 bonus bet. See the app website for more details. Let's go to another SEC game and back to Bryant Denny Stadium. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Alabama 6-45.5 in against Oklahoma. Alabama, this was a rough trip for them. This was the game that cost them a trip to the college football playoff a year ago, where they were double-digit favorites and just couldn't do anything. And you know what? Brent Venables is pretty good against a one-dimensional offense. Is that the case with the Alabama Crimson Tide this year? Alabama is only averaging 3.6 yards a rush. Of the 136 Division One teams, that is 108. That's not typical Alabama. Certainly not that Crimson Tide wishbone under Bear Bryant back in the old days. But still, the passing game is very good. Ty Simpson is very good. The receiving core is very good. Pass protection is very good. But watching him in person, a little bit more finesse than kind of power running element that we're seeing under DeBoer. No doubt, DeBoer, man, you give him a 2-point conversion or a fourth down conversion attempt. He is a great play designer. Always seems to be the case, even when they should have probably kicked the ball. He'll go for it. They convert. They run the clock out to end the game against LSU. But have they not just kind of another team that's kind of winning some close games? Georgia's winning these close games. Oklahoma's winning these close games. Texas is just the ceiling of the SEC this year. Revenge is on the mind, no doubt. My son's a student there. I've been talking about this return trip for quite some time. And we've been keeping a close eye on John Mateer since his return. Did they rush him back in Dallas against Texas? Probably so. It sure looked that way. And just trying to regain that form is Ole Miss certainly got a lot of yardage against Oklahoma up in Norman and winning that game comfortably. Soft number here. I thought it might be over a touchdown, but it's under a touchdown and going lower. It was 6.5 yesterday. Now 6-45.5. Paul.
Yeah, and I think this speaks to what you spoke of in previewing the Texas Georgia game. Maybe not a high concentration of great teams in the SEC, but just a lot of really good ones and a lot of talent at the top of the league. Teams that are quite even. So these numbers are pretty tight. I'm not going to talk about any more about the revenge angle. It's certainly a huge part of the handicap and approach to this game. And you've touched on it last year, losing to Oklahoma, playing by far their worst game of the year, cost Alabama a spot in the playoffs. Some felt maybe they should have got in over SMU, but that's water under the bridge at this point. And they know that, and they've been looking forward to this game, and it's been circled for some time. We've talked about it on the podcast on multiple times that since Alabama lost that season opener at Florida State, 31-17, is a 2-touchdown favorite. They have been, quite good. That game kind of seems like a one-off. They've won 8 straight games, including road victories at both Georgia and Missouri. You mentioned their inability to run the football. Jam Miller, who's from my hometown of Tyler, Texas, he's their best back, but he's been banged up this year, and he's returned to action. But I was just looking at his last 3 games against Tennessee, South Carolina, and LSU. He's run the ball 30 times for 54 yards. So, man, just not getting any running game there for the Tide. That is a little bit concerning, but he might be getting healthier for Alabama. Alabama's offense certainly is centered around their first-year starting quarterback, Ty Simpson. He's shown just great improvement since that loss to Florida State. He has been an absolute marksman at times. 67% of his throws have been completed, 8.3 yards per attempt, 21 touchdowns against just 1 interception. Simpson really taking care of the football, and his job certainly made easier by one of the nation's top receiving core, their top 2 wide receivers, Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. And you saw this guy last week in the victory by Alabama over LSU. I'm talking about their tight end, Josh Cuevas.
Yeah.
He's developed into a nice weapon for Ty Simpson, just giving opposing defenses something else to think about. Cuevas, 4 catches for 58 yards in last weekend's 20-9 victory over LSU. Their defense, it's certainly not at the level of some of Nick Saban's when Saban was there. Certainly not at the level of some of his finer units during the national championship runs, but none of its 8 opponents since losing to Florida State has scored more than 24 points against the Tide. Oklahoma still squarely in the playoff hunt. Certainly no doubt about that, thanks in large part to that outstanding defense. But in their last 2 games, a home loss to Ole Miss and the road victory at Tennessee, Sooners have allowed a total of 61 points and 887 total yards. So they're certainly showing some leakage at this point. John Mateer, you mentioned his right thumb injury. I hurt that thumb against Auburn, had surgery a few days later, missed 1 game. Maybe they brought him back, a little bit quick. He's been somewhat slow to return to form. He did have a good game, though, I thought, running and throwing the football against Tennessee. So maybe he's getting better. But I just think Alabama's the more complete team. They're 5-0 rather against the spread this season as a home favorite. And looking back since the start of 2020 as a home favorite, the Crimson Tide 27-9-1 against the spread. Again, they've had this one circled for almost a year. I like the Tide minus the points over Oklahoma.
All right, let's move on to the Big Ten. And look at this one. I've been to Wrigley Field, I don't know, over 50 times in my life. I don't know why they put them lights up. Man, come on. Give me that midweek afternoon games. I love that Ferris Bueller effect when you go to games during the week where everybody else is at work. Anyway, I digress. Michigan here, they're going to Wrigley Field. Northwestern's going to have their one thing about Northwestern in Evanston, they got some facilities, incredible football facility, athletic facility, and then their new stadium along the lake will be picturesque as well. Pretty cool town just north of Chicago. But Michigan here, 11 and a half now. It's going up, it's climbing at Bet Rivers, 41 and a half. And just the math alone, wait a minute, 11 and a half, 41 and a half. Low scoring game. Totals in the low 40s, one of the lowest total on the board this week. And then you're going to give me double digits semi home. There'll be just as many Michigan fans as there will be Northwestern fans in Wrigley Field. I get that. But just kind of something about these kind of nondescript settings. It just seems like the math doesn't fit here. How about Michigan? Still 7-2. Scoring there in the 60s in in Division One as far as scoring. The yards per play is a little bit better than I thought. It's actually just crept into the top 20 this year. But Michigan's got bigger battles to fight later on. They should be 9-2 going into the Ohio State game this year. So we'll see if they can make it four in a row. But that's kind of maybe that may be their biggest obstacle of getting a fourth team from the Big Ten into the college football playoff. If if form upholds the rest of the way. It hasn't much for this college football season. But just the math alone, Northwestern likes to put it in the mud. Michigan is a low snap per game team as well. So these teams, they kind of put it in the mud a little bit. Just seems like a lot of points. You can even call it a neutral site. That's fine instead of being at home. But the total is low. I'm going to take this busload of points in the Purple Cats at Wrigley plus the 11.5, Paul.
Yeah, I like your reasoning, Jimmy, on this selection and where you're coming from here. True freshman quarterback from Michigan, the highly touted Bryce Underwood, certainly a great athlete. And I'm sure he's going to be a great quarterback. But their offense hadn't exactly been an explosive juggernaut, if you will, under Underwood in his first season as a starter, and even more so probably on the road in 3 Big Ten games, road games against Wisconsin, Washington, and Purdue. The Wolverines have scored 24 points or fewer, so they hadn't scored a ton of points on the road. They are 1-3 against the spread on the road to this point. Meanwhile, Northwestern, they've covered 4 of their last 5 games. They play good defense. They played sound defense under their former coach, Pat Fitzgerald, and have continued to play solid defense under David Braun. Double digits does seem a little bit generous there at Wrigley on Saturday. And I don't think the crowd's going to be 50-50. I think Michigan's going to have more fans than
You're probably
Northwestern.
right.
But they can't get on the field. It'll be 11 versus 11, whoever has the crowd advantage. But I like where you're coming from there and your reasoning for backing the Wildcats.
All right, Paul, let's look at the one you're looking at. Stay in the Big Ten, and let's go to Los Angeles at the Coliseum downtown. USC is a 6.5 point favorite over the Iowa Hawkeyes. We both liked Iowa last weekend, and they came through as far as covering. But looking at the box score, man, Oregon had a lot of success rushing the football against the Iowa Hawkeyes last week. That's the one thing that really stood out to me last week as I was kind of bouncing around campus and wasn't glued in front of all the TVs like a normal Saturday for myself. So the exact number is 261 yards rushing, and if they had that many, you thought they would have not needed a last second drive and a field goal to win it. But that's what the case was. I was very tough at home. But I just wonder about Iowa in this spot. We talk about it a lot, emotional letdown, especially in college football after a team, after a team has a big win, a field rush fade the next week or something like that. But how about the losing team after they lost? The first time, and it was a similar situation for the Iowa Hawkeyes, they lost a tough one late to Indiana. They had a bye week before they played Wisconsin. And what a better way to kind of take a week off and a better opponent that. Not the case here. Now I'm going to have to travel into the warm environment of USC. We know about USC's offense. Maeva in this one of the top yards per attempt, one of the best yards per play offenses in all of college football. Lincoln Riley again. Now he got reprimanded, so the backup quarterback, Lil Heward, will not be wearing 80, the same number as the punter this week in the fake punt. Love that USC broadcast team, huh? Boy, I didn't know the punter had that good of an arm. That was a nice throw on 4th and 6 for the 10-yard completion. Come on, Lincoln. I mean, man, you don't need that against Northwestern. So anyway, sick under a touchdown here. You think it's a little light here against the Hawkeyes trying to get back up off the mat the very next week after a tough loss against Oregon last week.
Yeah, I mean, I like most people who follow college football closely, have a ton of respect for Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa football program and what he's been able to accomplish there in his long tenure. But man, they have got to be deflated after losing that heartbreaker to Oregon in the final seconds on a final second field goal this past weekend in Iowa City. Just a crushing defeat. It's a defeat that almost certainly ended. I know it was a remote possibility that Iowa would make the playoff ultimately, but still they had some chance. And it's just a football game they wanted to win, a hard fought football game played in the rain. And as you mentioned, Oregon, you kind of historically think of the Ducks as being flash and dash and not really a hard nosed football team, but they lined up and kind of played Big Ten football, kind of played Iowa's game and beat them at their own game ultimately there in Iowa City. But a very difficult loss for the Hawkeyes. On the other hand, one site currently lists, as of this morning, USC's chances to make the playoffs at 25%. But if the Trojans, if they take care of business this week against Iowa and then go on the road to Austin Stadium next weekend and upset Oregon, they're going to be very much in the playoff picture. So they certainly have a pathway to improve that 25% and actually make the playoff. Whether it will happen or not remains to be seen, but they certainly have that on the table. They are a team, USC, with a true, distinct home road dichotomy. They always seem to struggle on the road, especially as a road favorite. But as a home favorite, man, they have been cash money the past 2 seasons at the Coliseum. In fact, since the start of the 2024 season, USC now 8-1 against the spread as a home favorite. And that lone point spread setback came earlier this season against Michigan State. The Spartans were a 19-point road underdog at USC. Sparty scores on a 75-yard touchdown pass in the game's final 3 minutes, get the final deficit to within 2 touchdowns, get that backdoor cover. But again, USC 8-1 against the spread as a home favorite the last 2 seasons. And you look at their last 8 home games against Power 4 opponents specifically, USC has averaged 35.9 points per game. So they've averaged right at 36 points a game. They've scored at least 28 points in all 8 of their last 8 games against Power 4 opponents. So they've been scoring on everybody. This game's not going to get into a track meet because Iowa's too good on defense for that. But I think USC is going to score some points. I think Iowa's probably going to have some difficulty keeping pace. And I think the Hawkeyes, again, have to be deflated. I like USC minus the 6.5 over Iowa Saturday at the Coliseum.
And USC's at home. I mean, they've had their struggles on the road with these Big Ten trips, including, geographically, Notre Dame. You'll throw that one in there as well because they just have not covered at all this year and last year since they've joined the Big Ten and had to make those road trips. They're at home, and it's been much different at home. It just seems to be reminds me of with the traditional Rose Bowl, Big Ten versus Pac-10, where Pac-10 teams seem to have and even Pac-8 had a kind of a sort of the weather, the speed factor advantage against some of those Big Ten teams coming from the colder areas that are built, for the cold and part of it. All right, let's get to our last game. Neither of us have a pick. I'm ready to pull the trigger on one of these. Louisville on Friday night, 3.50.5 against Clemson. This was a game last year. It's a revenge spot where Louisville jumped all over Clemson last year, and Clemson was on their way to the ACC championship game. They needed some help from Syracuse in the last week of the regular season to knock off Miami to open the door for them to go to Charlotte and beat SMU in that conference championship game, but they did it. But in Clemson has won again. So we had them against North Carolina, had them this past week against Florida State, had them. They lost a tough one against Duke. Yes, Dabo was whining, but how about Cade Klubnik, who we were ready to give up? And it's a little similar path that last year for Klubnik. Slow start, but man, he really put up some numbers over the course of the season. He's in the process of doing it again. 78% completion percentage the last 4 games. Almost 10 yards. 10 is exceptional yards per attempt in college football. He's about 9.7 his last 4 games. He's thrown for 9 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. That's only 1 interception, and he's also run in a couple with his legs as well. Klubnik, maybe just after the pressure's off, after they've been eliminated, seems like they're just kind of especially in offense, even in the loss against Duke. You can't blame the offense. I mean, both teams amassed 999 yards in that game. But something tells me about Clemson in a revenge spot here. The pressure's off. And oh, by the way, Jeff Brom's name is being mentioned a lot for some of these jobs that is open, and he is deserving because he took over a messy situation in Purdue and he won. Since he left, they're not winning. He took over a suffering situation in Louisville. He's winning and winning pretty big. Look at his winning percentage in the multiple years that he's been in Louisville. He deserves. Now he's at his alma mater, and interesting enough, if you want to talk about coaching carousel, four hot coaches coaching right now at their alma mater. So adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing. But I'm kind of leaning to this one. I don't like these Thursday, Friday night games on the road. They seem to, even in the NFL on Thursday night, seems to have an advantage for the home team on the short week of travel. But something tells me a Klubnik in this form, they may be tough in Papa John Stadium on Friday night, Paul.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go a different route. Certainly, Cade Klubnik, man, that guy. Some NFL teams going to take him really early in April because he just shows you these flashes and makes throws that other guys can't. So I'm a big Cade Klubnik fan. Saw him last year in the playoff game, the loss in Austin to Texas. But man, especially in the second half, he was just dissecting Texas's defense. That was even better than this year's Longhorns defense, perhaps. So man, he's a great quarterback. I often talk about my belief, though. I'm going to come at it from a little different angle. Talk about often my belief that the line maker, the only position that really impacts the line as far as a player who's going to be out, is the starting quarterback. And the absence, I always say this, the absence of some non-quarterbacks who are critical pieces of their team certainly is going to impact that affected team's performance. And Isaac Brown, I mean, Louisville's running back, he is highly doubtful to play Friday against Clemson. And this guy, I was going to say that he's one of the most underrated players in college football, but I think Isaac Brown is the most underrated
Okay.
player, certainly the most underappreciated player in college football. I mean, you consider this last year as a true freshman, comes from the Miami area. They put out some pretty good football players from that area.
Yeah.
He goes for 1,173 yards as a true freshman, rushes for that much yardage, 7.1 yards per carry, averaged over 7 yards a carry last year. So this year, 782 yards rushing. He's averaging 8.6 yards per carry this season. So in 2 years, 1,955 yards rushing, over 7.5 yards per carry, 7.6 yards per carry in 21 career games. Also catches the ball out of the backfield, 41 receptions for 194 yards, looking like due to a lower body injury that, again, it's highly doubtful he's going to play. They do have some good depth at that position, but it's still not the same offense without Isaac Brown. The line does not reflect that Isaac Brown's not going to play. I'm with you. I think Clemson plus the points. I hadn't played them yet, but I think they're worth a look as well.
Paul, in the last three games as well for Isaac Brown. I mean, at Miami, 113 yards on just 15 carries, 7.5 yards attempt, 205 against BC. Now, listen, yeah, I want to play. I want to run the ball against BC too, but still 14 for 205, 14.6 yards an average and a touchdown, 16 rushes at in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech on the road for 130 yards. So, I mean, I mean, 450 yards the last three games. So 150. Not only has he been unbelievable, but he's peaking, and they're leaning on him more than ever right now. And what's that old saying? A running game is a quarterback's best friend. Early in we were wondering about Miller Moss, how he was kind of settling in. We just had our question marks. Well, with just handing the ball off and the play action off of an effective running game makes it so much easier for a quarterback in the USC transfer for Louisville. So we'll stay tuned and kind of monitor that. But yeah, that without him, then that puts that much more pressure on Miller Moss, and we'll have to see that probably his numbers will be affected as well. We do it every Tuesday and Thursday here on College Sports Rush YouTube channel, talking college football, giving picks, angles, information, analysis. It's 4 straight days that we do it here on the College Sports Rush YouTube channel. Our friends at the 10, Doug Kazarian, Greg Waddell, and Troy Macker every Tuesday and Thursday. So Tuesday to Friday, 4 straight days of college football picks, analysis, information, and analysis. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott. We'll be back with our best bets on Thursday on the College Sports Rush YouTube channel, brought to you by Bet Rivers.